Good afternoon, all of you lovely people. I am Brooks Barrett, the UCC's Environmental Justice Minister. On behalf of the UCC's Council for Climate Justice, welcome to each of you. Climate action assemblies are a way in which we give some tissues, tendons, and joints to the body of Christ so that we can effectively take action together for one of the most important ministries in our world today. In the UCC, we have a constellation of theologies and practices that make us a spirit-led and member-driven force in this world. We are fortunate in this because we know that successful efforts for social change often happen through member-driven, constituency-driven organizations working from the roots on up. We have arrived at our assembly today after having gone through a process last year of carefully considering proposals for action. Each of the three proposals adopted is rooted in UCC General Synod resolutions. Today, we will hear from three speakers. Up first, we will have Rob Grable, who helped lead the effort to pass the General Synod resolution on plastics. Then we will have Dwight Wagenius, who authored the General Synod resolution on electrification. Finally, we will have Sue Miller, who, as of last Friday, is our new lead organizer for the Vote for Climate Hope campaign. Rob, if you would get us started.
We're very excited to have three different initiatives coming out of the Climate Justice Council, all related to the resolutions of witness that were passed by the UCC Synod in July. And I'm going to begin the plastics oriented one by relating what happened this last week in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has an educational session called Prepared to Serve, a statewide educational event with 40 or 50 different workshops. And one of the workshops told the story of how the resolution began as a joint effort from Florida and from New Hampshire, authored by the Reverend Bob Shore-Goss, a member of the Climate Justice Council, who had spent time in New Hampshire and is now located in Florida. And it was his vision that these two states would bring resolutions through their state conferences and then bring them to Synod and combine them. And that is eventually what happened. And we had an educational session run by a former state representative named Marge Shepherdson, who is a member of the New Hampshire Conference Environmental Justice Mission Group and was part of the editing team that brought the resolution to Synod. So the plastics resolution, Freedom from Plastics, was passed on July 4th, appropriately enough. And then as was the case with the other two resolutions that you will be hearing about today, became part of the initiative that began this January. The Climate Justice Council of the United Church of Christ decided to really focus on implementation so that a resolution of witness would not just be passed and sit on the shelf. And teams were formed. I was one of the principals of the plastics team, and we have assembled a group of interested representatives from all over the country, and we are continuing to take names. So if you are interested in helping implement a Freedom from Plastics resolution of witness, please do be in touch. One of the things that we focused on right away was a concept called extended producer responsibility. And that should be your one takeaway from this brief session. Extended producer responsibility is the sort of policy that puts responsibility for plastics and plastics use, single-use plastics, back on the manufacturers by making them responsible financially, by making them responsible for the promulgation of their products. Fossil fuel companies like to put the individual responsibility on us. And so we are urged to recycle and we are urged to reduce our use, and we are urged to mind our carbon footprints. And that's fine, and we should do that. But the responsibility needs to be given back to the manufacturers. And that is what EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, does. EPR is the subject of as many as 10 to 12 legislative bills all over this country. There are a number of bills being considered by legislations in New Hampshire and in Rhode Island and in New York and in Washington State. And as a matter of fact, there are a number that have already been passed in states like Maine and states like California, states like Illinois. And so we want to describe some of the things that these bills do and describe the process. We decided in the Creation Justice Council that we wanted a year-long initiative that would be tangible and measurable. So at the end of the year, we could really show something for all of our efforts. And that's the same with electrification, which you will be hearing about, and the same, obviously, with voting and voting for climate. And you'll be hearing more about that as well. I'm going to talk briefly about what's happening in the state of New Hampshire. I am an associate pastor at a church in Hanover, New Hampshire, and we have as many as 4 different bills that are EPR related in front of the New Hampshire legislature. And some of our individuals have been responsible for sponsoring bills. We have several legislators in our group and testifying on behalf of these bills. And one of the best things that's happened from implementing this resolution of witness has been the relationships we've built with other organizations and with other working groups. There is an entity known as Beyond Plastics, which I'm sure many of you may be familiar with. And Beyond Plastics has done an extraordinary job across the country at driving and supporting policies such as EPR. And we've established a relationship where we are dependent on them for information and on updates about where some of these initiatives are heading. And we are hoping to provide people power. Motivated individuals, motivated congregations, even motivated associations and conferences to help with testimony, to help with witnessing, to help with information. And in the case of, for instance, House Bill 1636 in New Hampshire, which is specifically related to EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, we've been very effective in engaging in support. So this is something that is ongoing, and we are hoping to now match up individuals from UCC churches across the country to bills in New York, to bills in Illinois, to bills in some of these other states. I want to focus particularly on New York State, where there is a Senate bill which some of the individuals, Judith Inc. in particular, she's the president of Beyond Plastics, and she said that the Senate bill, the EPR bill in front of the New York Assembly is, and I quote, not only the most important environmental bill of the session, but the most important environmental bill of the decade. And we are even now soliciting people to testify on its behalf, to contact members of the Assembly and to urge them to continue to support passage. Before I close, I want to bring it back to Brooks Barrett, the convener of the Climate Justice Council, because on April 20th, the UCC is sponsoring its second Earth Summit, which is a national celebration of Earth Day, which will include a keynote speech by Bill McKibben, who certainly needs no introduction to us, and which will include a panel of plastics-oriented people, some of the very best people in the country who are talking about plastics through the lens of social justice, because opposing single-use plastics is in so many ways a social justice issue. And I'd like to have Brooks describe one of the panelists that we have managed to arrange. So Brooks, I'm going to throw it over to you for a second.
Thank you, Rob. As many of you might know, when it comes to environmental issues, the equivalent of the Nobel Peace Prize is called the Goldman Prize. And we are honored that we are going to have with us for the UCC's Earth Summit on April 20th, one of the winners of the Goldman Prize, Sharon Levine. She runs a faith-based organization confronting one of the largest plastics companies in the world, Formosa. And she is based down in what is often referred to as Cancer Alley, that stretch that runs from Baton Rouge down to New Orleans along the Mississippi River and has some of the highest cancer rates in our country. Sharon Levine will be with us, and we'll also have a full panel of people addressing plastics through an environmental justice lens. We'll also have Bill McKibben giving the keynote. It'll be a terrific event. And Rob, I also mentioned that for Earth Sunday, we have worked with one of our ecumenical partners, Creation Justice Ministries, to create a resource for those who want to focus on plastics for Earth Sunday. The resource has the title Plastic Jesus. And so we'll provide a link for that so that people can download that. We'll additionally have a webinar in April with Creation Justice Ministries, digging into and kind of presenting that resource for Earth Sunday. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Thank you very much, Brooks. And we are hopeful that all of you who are listening or watching to this will reserve Saturday, April 20th for the United Church of Christ Earth Day Summit, which is one of several events, including the art contest, which has been mentioned, and including some of the other events that are helping make this year a very important and essential year in our struggle against reducing our use of plastics. So please stay tuned, and please contact us if you are interested in joining us and in helping. Thank you very much.
In late 2022, 10 churches in Minnesota and Wisconsin concurred in proposing a General Synod resolution to urge UCC congregations and members to actively plan for and implement electrifying the fossil-fueled activities of our lives as a climate action. Last year's General Synod adopted the resolution. This council last November accepted implementation of the resolution as one of the 2024 UCC climate action initiatives. It was proposed as an electrification checklist initiative. The initiative seeks to utilize checklists to assess opportunities for congregations and households to replace fossil-fueled equipment, appliances, and machines with electric ones. Our basic plan is to reach out to conferences with the resolution and the checklists, and for conferences to reach out to individual churches, and for those churches to reach out to individual members with the home checklist, that is, individual members, including both homeowners and renters. Brooks has put in the chat or made available to you links to the checklists. We prepared two checklists, one for churches and one for member households. The checklists include the fossil fueled uses replaceable with electricity. Biggest impact greenhouse gas eliminating actions are space heating and cooling, water heating, cooking, and clothes drying. If you look at the list, both lists, two items from the home list are not on the church list: clothes drying and electric vehicles. And again, looking at the list, other than the first item, the energy audit, which we believe really ought to be done first, the other items are not in priority order. Each church and member has to decide based on their circumstances which can or should be done first. The national team has reached out to 31 of the 36 conferences and we'll reach the rest in the next week to 10 days. We attach a copy of the resolution and the checklists with an introduction to the resolution and an invitation to open to dialogue. What we can do for the conferences and churches to help implement the electrification resolution, and what guidance they can offer us. What have they tried that worked or didn't work, and what lessons did they learn? And who can we talk to have a mutually beneficial conversation or relationship? We have begun to arrange Zoom or telephone meetings or conversations. Our access to conferences is websites. So we've looked at the website, found a contact person, typically the conference minister. The websites really vary in how much they address conferences and websites, and we think they're misleading because some of the conferences which don't list climate or environmental work on their website have individuals or congregations that are doing a lot of work. So instead of picking and choosing, we're going out to every conference. Now, we know what we can offer to conferences, churches, and individuals. Resources, lists of books, webinars, podcasts, organizations that provide expert information on theology, technology, and financing of electrification, non-governmental organizations, levels of government. And we have identified some wonderful resources, with more coming out each day, it seems. But we also know from our own experience that one could infer from our coming bearing gifts that we are like the agents saying we're from the government and we're here to help you. Well, yuck. We know that we don't have all the answers, and we know that there's a pool of knowledge and experience out there that we want to tap into. That's why we're looking to make this a mutually beneficial conversation, asking conferences, churches, and individuals about their experience. As to the experience that's already out there, we really recommend looking at the PBS show on Rock Spring Congregational UCC in Arlington, Virginia, that a link to which Brooks has put on the website and posted, I think, with this recording. It's really great what they've done. Every homeowner or renter should look at the volts, VOLTS.WTF podcast with David Roberts. It's entitled "So You Want to Electrify Your Home." It shows, or it has David Roberts interviewing Rewiring America, another great organization, Rewiring America's technical director. We recommend listening to that podcast with the UCC checklist in hand. Doing that, you will have the beginning of your plan for electrification. Who, what, when, resources, financing, hazards, and advice based on experience, as well as expertise, things to look for, how to deal with contractors, how to deal with government for permits, and it's directed both to homeowners and renters. It's a great podcast. There may be others out there as good, but that's the one that we found that we really liked. So as to goals, when we set this up, we talked about, for each of the resolutions, we talked about setting goals. We have set a goal for the National Task Force, all four of us, to reach out to every conference by mid-March. We're going to meet that. To establish meaningful phone, text, email contact with someone in 20 of the conferences by Earth Day to gain experiences and discuss the checklist initiative. We don't know how realistic this goal is, given most of this period is in Lent, but we are establishing those contacts. We also have a goal to have 15 conferences establish a program to reach out to a percentage of their congregation, a percentage that they established based upon their knowledge, to initiate a conversation on electrification. And last, our goal is to establish an information exchange forum, website, webpage, or whatever will make electrification information accessible to conferences and congregations and members by June 1st. We think we'll make that goal too, but we'll see. In November, When we sought approval of the council for this resolution for the climate action implementation, we said that conference and association teams can conduct outreach to churches with the goal of having at least 50% of the churches in each region completing the checklist. We've not reconsidered that goal, but believe it was probably a bit optimistic. Let's hope it wasn't. We also said then that congregational green or climate justice teams can utilize the church checklist while also disseminating the household checklist to members. So to use it for their church facility and for members to use it in their homes, whether owned or rented. We also said then that conference and association teams, in addition to disseminating and utilizing checklists, can provide churches and members with up-to-date information about state-level legislation, because there's legislation being proposed all the time. I know in Minnesota, there are several pieces of legislation that could be significant under consideration right now. Other information that can be provided is how the Inflation Reduction Act benefits related to rebates for electrification can be accessed in their state. Now, some of the Inflation Reduction Act monies that are available, it's federal money, but it's being distributed by a state agency that's selected by the state. Minnesota has a great Department of Commerce. They promised last fall, a few months after the IRA was adopted, to have out guidance soon. Well, they're still saying soon, and we believe them this time. We think it actually will be pretty soon. If we're going to meet the challenge of climate change, we must act now. This is an all hands on deck moment. Please join us in this effort. I included my contact information in the chat for this meeting. Please look it up, dwagenius@gmail.com, or call or text me at 612-799-5009. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in joining our national task force, we're doing pretty well, but we could use some help. But certainly, when this is implemented at the conference level and the congregation level, we're going to need motivated people like you. Please join us. Thanks. I'm available for questions. Contact me directly or right here.
So I am excited to talk to you today about the Vote for Climate Hope campaign, which is an initiative by the UCC aimed at addressing the urgent climate crisis we face today. The Vote for Climate Hope campaign builds on the success of our previous Climate Hope Cards campaign from last year, 2023. It's a member-driven initiative rooted in our strong commitments to climate action and inequality at the federal level. Our commitment to climate action is reflected in our General Synod resolutions. The UCC has made strong commitments to climate action at the federal level of the United States government, to transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy by 2040, and affirming the intersectionality of climate justice with all justice issues. Our top priorities in 2024 include electing climate justice champions to Congress and advocating for legislation that addresses environmental racism and the harms faced by frontline communities. To shape our top priorities for 2024, we surveyed our local church leaders from the Climate Hope Cards campaign. And their top priorities were electing climate justice champions to Congress and advocating for legislation addressing environmental racism and frontline community harms. The insight we gathered has helped shape our focus and guided us in identifying our top priorities for this year. We recognize the pivotal role that lawmakers play in shaping policies that impact our environment and our communities. By electing climate justice champions to Congress, we aim to ensure that our legislative bodies prioritize environmental sustainability, equity, and justice. The champions will advocate for bold climate action. It will support policies that mitigate the effects of climate change, and it will prioritize the well-being of those most impacted. Environmental racism disproportionately affects marginalized communities, exacerbating existing inequalities and injustices. Frontline communities, particularly communities of color, low-income communities, and indigenous communities, bear the brunt of pollution, environmental degradation, and climate-related disasters. We're committed to advocating for legislation that addresses these injustices head-on, ensuring that policies prioritize the needs and rights of frontline communities. Our Climate Hope campaign is driven by a vision of collective actions and hope. We launched the Climate Hope Cards campaign in 2023, where churches across the country collected 8,000 postcards urging for stronger environmental protections. Now, with the Votes for Climate Hope campaign, we aim to mobilize on a national scale to address the urgent climate crisis. But why do we need a faith-rooted national campaign for climate hope? Well, we've got three main reasons. The first is solutions are needed that match the scale and urgency of the climate crisis. We must address action at every level, particularly with the federal government. Our institutional system can mobilize both the scope and the need necessary. Second is because our goals are national in scope, we need organizing that is national in scope. We know that the civil rights movement started at the local level with leaders like Rosa Parks and the Women's Political Council as they organized the Montgomery boycott. But that movement did not stop there. It expanded nationally, and ultimately it achieved federal legislation. Our goal is similar in that we are driven and inspired by local action. And we're not stopping at local action. We aim to expand and connect to affect societal change. And third, our greatest strength is our churches. Churches have deep roots within their communities, and right now we're a divided nation, and our churches can bring together diverse communities to affect change. The body of Christ has many parts, but one body. Isolated actions are not where our highest potential lays. Our churches are the front line of love, action, and hope. Our campaign consists of several key components, including the Vote for Climate Hope art contest, where children and youth express their hopes for the environment through art. We also collect Climate Hope voter pledge cards, engage in phone banking to encourage voter turnout, and we will celebrate our achievements post-election. The Vote for Climate Hope art contest for children and youth engages younger generation in climate activism, and it encourages reflection on hopes for the environment. The art contest taps into the #1 reasons adults care about climate issues, our kids and our grandkids. It also provides an easy entry point for congregations that allow us to expand how many congregations later participate in our summer and fall actions. The art contest encourages kids to draw, paint, and color about the world they live. And we want to know, what are their hopes for the world? What do children want to be protected? And how do children want the adults in their lives to vote? We're looking at several methods for grassroots mobilization. The first is door knocking. Volunteers physically visit individual homes within communities to engage voters face to face. It is a personalized touch that allows campaigners to establish direct relationships with voters, listen to their concerns, and share information on the campaign's platform. The second are literature drops. Lit drops place flyers on doorknobs. It's less effective at turning out voters than door knocking, but it can be a better fit for volunteers and organizations that have a limited capacity. Within 2 hours, volunteers can cover 120 doors. The goal isn't to have conversations, but they can happen in driveways and sidewalks. The third is collecting voter pledge cards in church. And fourth is similar, collecting voter pledge cards in community at places like farmers markets. Fifth is phone banking. Phone banking is an efficient way to reach a large number of voters quickly and cost-effectively. It allows engagement with individuals who may not have been reached through other forms of outreach, like door knocking. Phone banks can mobilize communities, build support for our campaign, and drive voter turnout in support of climate justice champions and legislations. We will use the data that we collect from the voter pledge cards to do our phone banking. Sixth is friend banking. Churches can organize friend banks where groups of volunteers gather to call people they know about voting. The idea is to call 10 people you know. And this can be scary for volunteers, and it can be anxiety provoking to talk with people we know as opposed to strangers, because it requires us putting ourselves out there to talk about things we don't often bring up with our friends. However, a friend bank creates an atmosphere of support which mitigates volunteer fears. And Brooks is going to share, if he hasn't already, with you a link for a survey that we developed to help give us feedback from you on the mobilization methods that you might be willing to engage in. The Vote for Climate Hope campaign is a testament to our commitment to addressing the urgent climate crisis we face today. And I encourage all of you to get involved and join us in our efforts to create a more just and sustainable world for future generations. And together, we can make a difference.